The screen glowed, a sterile blue light in the soft evening dimness of our living room. My finger hovered over the numbers, frozen in disbelief. It had to be a mistake. Bank error. A glitch in the system. Because the number staring back at me under outgoing transfer was the entirety of our life savings. $2.5 million.
Gone.
Transferred. To an account I didn't recognize. The air left my lungs in a rush, the kind that makes you gasp but no air comes in. My chest tightened, a vice squeezing my heart. The couch beneath me felt suddenly unstable, like I was floating on water. I blinked, shaking my head, willing the numbers to change, to revert to the comfortable seven-figure balance that represented 2 decades of work, of saving, of shared dreams. But the numbers stayed cold, stark, and devastating. The date of the transfer was yesterday. The payee name was a string of letters I didn't want to know. It couldn't be real. Not him. Not after everything. Not with our money. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Before the digital betrayal that felt like a physical blow, life was a comfortable hum. Not a fairy tale. No marriage is, but solid. Predictable. We lived in a house we loved, filled with sunlight in the mornings and the quiet scent of old books in the evenings. 20 years married. We'd built something, brick by brick, decision by decision. It felt secure. Like a fortress against the chaos of the world.
He was David.
Reliable David. My David. A little quiet, maybe absorbed in his work, but present. He had a way of making me feel safe, grounded. He handled the finances, always had. I trusted him implicitly. Why wouldn't I? We were a unit. The money in that account wasn't just numbers. It was the retirement we planned in Portugal, the down payment for our daughter's first home, the cushion that let us sleep at night knowing we were okay, more than okay. It was the culmination of our combined efforts, our sacrifices, our shared future. We talked about it constantly. Where we'd go, what we'd do. He'd show me spreadsheets, growth charts. It was our story, written in numbers. There were signs I see that now. Small cracks in the facade. The late nights that became later. The way he shielded his phone, a sudden, jarring secrecy from a man who used to leave it face up anywhere. The emotional distance that felt like a chill in the air between us, explained away by stress at work, by the general fatigue of long-term marriage. I'd attributed it to life, to routine, to the natural settling that happens after 2 decades. I told myself every couple goes through phases. I didn't want to look too closely, because looking felt like acknowledging a problem I didn't know how to fix. It's easier to live in the comfortable quiet than confront the potential storm. So I didn't. I poured my energy into my own work, into our daughter, who was away at college, into keeping the house a home. I nurtured the garden, watched the news, made his favorite meals. I performed the wifely duties, the partnership duties, believing he was doing the same, just in his own way. The day before I saw the transfer, we had dinner. Pasta with pesto, his favorite. He talked about a difficult client, about market fluctuations. Normal things. He smiled. He asked about my day. He reached across the table and took my hand, just for a second. It felt a little distant, his touch, but I chalked it up to tiredness. I remember the pattern on the tablecloth, the way the candlelight reflected in his eyes. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, that screamed, I am about to steal every penny we own and give it to someone else. Finding the transfer was, I can't describe the feeling accurately. It was like watching the ground beneath you turn to dust, slowly at first, then crumbling away completely, leaving you in free fall. My vision narrowed. My ears started to ring. 2.5 million. Our money.
Gone.
The payee name finally clicked, a name I'd heard whispered once, dismissed as office gossip.
Sarah.
Not a client. Not a colleague. The mistress. It hit me with the force of a physical blow. Not just theft. Betrayal. Utter, soul-shattering betrayal. He hadn't just taken the money. He had taken our past, our present, our future, and handed it to her. My first instinct was pure, unadulterated panic. My hands trembled so violently I had to grip them together. My breath hitched in ragged gasps. I scrambled to check other accounts. My personal savings? Still there, thankfully small. Our daughter's college fund? Untouched, thank God. But the joint account, the core of everything, was empty.
Zero.
$2,500,000 vanished. I felt a primal fear, cold and sharp.
How could he?
How could he be sitting across from me yesterday, holding my hand, knowing he was doing this? The lies weren't just words. They were actions, calculated, devastating. I tried to call him. My thumb hovered over his name in my contacts list. What would I say? Did you steal all our money? The absurdity of it, the sheer magnitude of the crime and the betrayal, made it impossible to form the words. I hung up before it even rang. I needed proof. I took screenshots, my fingers clumsy, shaking. Printed the bank statements, the printer whirring loudly in the silent house, each page feeling heavier than the last, confirming the nightmare. The paper felt cold and clinical, documenting the death of my marriage, the theft of my future. When he finally came home, the house felt like a stage set. The familiar scent of his cologne, the jingle of his keys, sounds that used to mean comfort now felt like an invasion. I watched him from the top of the stairs, my heart pounding against my ribs. He looked normal. Tired, maybe. He tossed his keys onto the hall table, loosened his tie. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the statements in his face. But a cold, quiet rage had started to simmer beneath the panic.
Not yet.
I needed him to walk into it. He came upstairs, calling my name softly. Hey, you home? Like any other night. My voice was a stranger's voice when I finally spoke. In the living room, I was sitting on the couch again, the printouts fanned out on the coffee table. My hands were clenched in my lap. He walked in, saw the papers, saw my face. His easy smile faltered. He stopped, his gaze flicking from me to the statements. What's all this? He tried for casual, but his voice was too tight. I picked up the statement showing the transfer details. My hand was steady now. The cold rage was a solid block in my chest. This, I said, my voice dangerously low, is $2.5 million. And it's gone. I pushed the paper towards him. Transferred. To Sarah. His face drained of color. The blood seemed to rush from his head, leaving him pale, his eyes wide. He didn't say anything for a long moment. He just stared at the paper, then at me. The silence stretched, thick with accusation and his dawning horror that I knew. Then the excuses started. A rush of words, stumbling over each other. Business investment. A temporary loan. A client he was helping. Sarah was just facilitating. It would be back. Just a few days. He swore on our daughter's life. It was a lie so transparent, so desperate, it was insulting. $2.5 million to his mistress is not a temporary business loan facilitated by her. It was a theft, plain and simple, with her as the beneficiary. Don't lie to me, David. My voice was quiet, but it cut through his panicked babbling. I know about her. I know this isn't a business deal.
You stole our money.
You stole my money. You stole our future. He stopped lying then. His face hardened. The fear was replaced by something cold, calculating. It's our money, he said, his voice flat. Half of it is mine. I can do what I want with my half. Half. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You think you took your half? You took all of it. Every penny. And you think that makes it okay, because you're entitled to half? You planned this, didn't you? You waited until you could take everything. He didn't deny it. He just stared at me, a stranger in my living room. It's done, he said, almost casually now. The panic was gone, replaced by a chilling arrogance. The transfer went through yesterday. There's nothing you can do. His words, there's nothing you can do, echoed in the room. They hung in the air, heavy with finality. He thought he had won. He thought he had pulled off the perfect crime, leaving me penniless and powerless. He stood there, watching me, waiting for me to break, to cry, to collapse. And for a moment I thought I might. The weight of it, the sheer scale of the betrayal and the financial ruin, pressed down on me. Everything we had built, everything I had trusted, was a lie. He had dismantled my life, my security, piece by piece, and I hadn't even noticed until the final blow landed. The days that followed blurred into a nightmare of fear and despair. He stayed in the house, but it felt like a hostile occupation. He acted like nothing had happened, or worse, like I was overreacting. He talked about our future, about our plans, while knowing he had just destroyed them. I watched him, ate across from him, slept in the same house, though not the same bed, and felt utterly disconnected, adrift in a sea of his lies. The money was gone. The bank was sympathetic but unhelpful. The transfer was authorized from the joint account. His name was on it. It wasn't technically fraud against the bank. It was a domestic issue. A betrayal, not a crime in their eyes. I called friends, my voice shaking as I tried to explain, the words catching in my throat. The shame was immense. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted him so completely? Their shock mirrored my own, but sympathy didn't bring the money back. It didn't erase the gnawing fear of the future. How would I live? My own earnings were modest. The house was in both our names, but without capital, how would I even begin to untangle the mess? He held all the cards, or so it seemed. He had the money, the control. He had reduced me to someone who had to ask for help, for pity. I hated it. I hated him. But mostly, I hated feeling so helpless. There was a moment, a low point, where I sat in the garden, the place that usually brought me peace. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges, mirroring my mood. I looked at the flowers I'd tended, the soil I'd nurtured, and felt nothing. Just emptiness. He hadn't just taken the money. He'd taken the joy out of everything I loved. He had poisoned the well of my life. The thought of starting over, of fighting him, felt overwhelming. It felt impossible. I considered walking away, just disappearing, letting him have it all. What was left anyway? A hollow house and a broken heart. That night, I looked at a photo of my daughter on my bedside table. Her bright, hopeful smile. She depended on me. I had always been the strong one, the stable one. Could I let him take everything from her? Too, by extension? By leaving me with nothing? The cold rage returned, sharp and clean. It wasn't enough to just survive. It wasn't enough to just walk away with what little I had left. He couldn't be allowed to win like this. He couldn't be allowed to build his new life on the ashes of ours, funded by money he stole from me. Something shifted inside me. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about justice, about standing up for myself, about refusing to be a victim. I wouldn't let him break me. I wouldn't let him take my dignity along with the cash. He thought he had nothing to fear because the money was gone, cleared. He thought he was untouchable. That arrogance was his first mistake. My second breath came, deep and steady. The despair was still there, a heavy cloak, but underneath it, a steel rod had formed in my spine. I needed help, real help, not pity, not sympathy. I needed someone who knew how to fight dirty. I started researching lawyers. Not just divorce lawyers, but those specializing in financial fraud, in complex asset recovery. It felt like navigating a labyrinth while blindfolded. Every search result felt inadequate. I read articles, case studies. Most dealt with corporate crime, not personal devastation on this scale, within a marriage. I made calls, my voice regaining a little strength with each one, fueled by the cold fire in my gut. Some lawyers were dismissive. Some were too expensive. Some said it was a long shot, that tracing the money and recovering it once transferred, especially across different financial institutions, was incredibly difficult, maybe impossible before it disappeared into other assets or was simply spent. The ticking clock of the money clearing loomed large in every conversation. But then I found her. Sarah Jenkins. Recommended by a friend of a friend, described as a financial pit bull with a creative approach, her office was minimalist, glass and steel, overlooking the city. She wasn't warm, but she was sharp. Her eyes, behind thin-rimmed glasses, missed nothing. I sat across from her polished desk and told her everything, laying out the screenshots, the bank statements, the cold, clinical proof of my husband's betrayal. I expected sympathy, maybe a shake of the head. Instead, she leaned forward, her expression one of intense focus. When I finished, the silence in the room was different from the silence in my house. It was active, thoughtful. She didn't offer platitudes. She asked questions. Precise questions about the date, the time, the banks involved, the nature of the account it was transferred to as much as I knew. She explained the difficulty, the legal hurdles. The money was likely in the mistress's account by now, or would be very soon. Once it cleared, it could be moved again, invested, hidden. Time was critical. Every second mattered. Most lawyers would tell you it's too late, she said, her voice low and even. Once a transfer clears, especially domestically, reversing it is incredibly difficult without proof of explicit fraud against a bank or a court order that can take time to get.
But
My heart, which had been sinking again, gave a lurch. But there might be a window, she said. Interbank transfers aren't instantaneous. There's a processing period, sometimes 24 to 48 hours, sometimes a little longer depending on the banks, weekends, public holidays. If we can act before it fully clears and becomes available to her, there's a legal mechanism. A freezing order. It's aggressive. It's complex. It requires compelling evidence presented immediately to a judge. We need to argue that the funds are clearly traceable marital assets, fraudulently transferred without your knowledge or consent, for the express purpose of depriving you of them. It won't be easy. Judges are hesitant to freeze funds without ironclad proof. But the paper trail, the fact that it's the entire balance transferred to a third party, that helps our case. It looks suspicious, even to a judge who sees these things every day. Hope. A tiny, fragile sprout of it in the barren landscape of my despair. Can we do it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. We can try, she said, her gaze steady. But we have to move now. Like right now. We need to assemble the petition, the affidavits, get the filings ready. We need to convince a judge on an emergency basis. And we need to pray that transfer hasn't fully settled yet. The next hours were a blur of intense, focused work. We were in her office, the city lights coming on outside. Phones ringing, papers shuffling. I provided every detail I could recall, every piece of evidence. Sarah and her team worked with a quiet urgency, assembling the legal case brick by brick. The air in the office was thick with tension, with the unspoken understanding that we were in a race against time, a race against my husband and his mistress. Every minute felt like an hour. Every sound felt amplified. My stomach was a knot of anxiety, but the cold steel in my spine held firm. I wasn't the helpless woman on the couch anymore. I was a woman fighting for her life, for what was rightfully hers. This was my turning point. No more despair. No more helplessness. Just action. Ruthless, focused action. Sarah explained the process. They would file an emergency motion with the court. A judge would review the evidence ex parte, meaning without the other side present, because notifying them would defeat the purpose and allow the money to disappear. If the judge was convinced, they would issue a temporary freezing order or a temporary restraining order, TRO, specifically targeting the funds in that specific account at that specific bank. Then, the order would be served on the recipient bank and the recipient of the funds, the mistress. The bank would be legally obligated to immediately freeze the specified amount. It sounded simple when she said it, but the weight of convincing a judge on short notice, based on what might still look like a messy marital dispute to an outsider, felt enormous. The legal language swirled around me, dense and complicated, but I clung to the core concept: the freeze. Stop the money. Stop him. Stop her.
my future depended on it.
We worked late into the night, fueled by coffee and sheer determination. I signed affidavits, my hand cramping. Each signature felt like signing my declaration of war. David was likely at home, sleeping soundly in the bed we shared for 20 years, confident in his victory, unaware that the battle was far from over. The thought gave me a grim kind of energy. Finally, the documents were ready. Sarah's associate raced to the courthouse early the next morning to file the emergency motion. Then came the waiting. The agonizing, soul-crushing wait. I couldn't go home. The thought of being in that house, knowing what he had done, while waiting for the fate of our life savings to be decided, was unbearable. I checked into a small hotel downtown, the anonymity a strange comfort. I sat in the sterile hotel room, watching the clock, jumping at every buzz of my phone. Every news alert felt like a potential signal. Every siren outside felt like the sound of my life falling apart. Sarah had said it could take hours, maybe even a day, depending on the judge's availability and caseload. Hours felt like an eternity. I replayed everything in my head. His lies, his arrogance, the look on his face when he said, "There's nothing you can do." That look was my fuel now. I tried to distract myself. Watched mindless television. Read a book. Nothing worked. My mind kept returning to the numbers, the transfer, the mistress, the cold, hard fact of his betrayal. The potential outcome gnawed at me. If the judge didn't grant the order, or if the money cleared seconds before the order was served, it was gone. Forever. My life, financially, would be decimated. I would have to start over from zero, at my age, after believing I was set. The fear was a physical ache. Hour after hour. The sun rose. I showered, dressed, went through the motions of being a functioning human being, all while my stomach churned with anxiety. I ate breakfast I couldn't taste. Walked the city streets, without seeing them. My phone was a lead weight in my hand. Every time it rang, my heart leaped into my throat. Was it Sarah? Was it the news I desperately needed? Or was it a notification confirming the funds had fully cleared, signaling my defeat? The call came late in the afternoon. My phone rang, Sarah's name on the screen. My hand shook as I answered. I could barely breathe. "Sarah?" My voice was tight, barely audible. "It's done," her voice was calm, professional, but there was an underlying note of triumph. "The judge granted the emergency order. We got it signed 2 hours ago. It's been served on the bank holding her account, and they've confirmed the freeze. The funds, the full 2.5 million, are secured. They are frozen." Frozen. The word was like a key turning in a lock, releasing a pressure I hadn't realized I'd been holding for days. Frozen. Safe. Recovered.
Not gone.
Not hers. Still mine. Still ours, technically, but out of his reach, out of her reach. A wave of relief washed over me so intense, my knees buckled. I sank onto the edge of the hotel bed, the phone pressed to my ear. Tears, hot and unexpected, streamed down my face. They weren't tears of sadness or despair this time. They were tears of pure, unadulterated relief. And something else. Something cold and sharp. Victory. "They're frozen," I repeated, needing to hear it again. "Yes," she confirmed. "Completely frozen. She can't touch them. He can't touch them. They are legally secured pending further court order." We talked for a while longer, going over the next steps. The order was temporary. There would be hearings, legal arguments. But the money was stopped. The bleeding had stopped. Sarah's voice was the sound of confidence, of a shield being raised. I had found my protector, my champion. The plot twist wasn't just that the money was frozen. It was when it happened, and the sheer, brutal surprise it delivered to David and his mistress. They thought they were safe. They thought they had pulled it off. He'd even taunted me with his perceived victory. He was likely celebrating, maybe planning their new life together, funded by my pain. He had underestimated me completely. He thought I would crumble. He thought I would be helpless. He thought "there's nothing you can do" was the end of the story. It wasn't. It was the beginning of his end. I didn't contact him immediately. I savored the quiet victory, the feeling of power returning. I imagined the moment he found out. Did the bank call her? Did she call him in a panic? Did he try to log in and see the funds inaccessible? The sheer, Sudden shock must have been immense. The rug pulled out from under them when they were standing, triumphant, on top of the stolen cash. The scream came the next day. He called my hotel room, somehow tracking me down through forwarded mail or a panicked guess. I hesitated, then answered. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear the sound of his world collapsing. What the hell did you do? His voice wasn't calm, wasn't arrogant. It was pure, unadulterated rage, laced with shock and panic. I hired a lawyer, David, I said, my voice steady, calm, a stark contrast to his fury. A good one. You froze the account. You froze our money.
How?
It cleared. He sounded genuinely blindsided, disbelieving. His voice rose to a frantic, high-pitched scream. That money was mine. You can't do this. You can't. Apparently, I can, I said, a cold, satisfied smile touching my lips. It didn't clear, David. Not fully. My lawyer was faster. She's very good. Better than you anticipated, clearly. There was a pause, a strangled sound on his end. He must have been reeling. His carefully laid plan, months or years in the making, ruined in an instant by a piece of paper and a judge's signature. He had accounted for my sadness, my helplessness, maybe even my anger. But he hadn't accounted for my resilience, my cold determination, or the fact that I could find someone who knew how to fight back just as ruthlessly as he had attacked. You think you've won? He snarled, the scream lowering to a dangerous growl. I stopped you, I said simply. I stopped you from taking everything and walking away clean. That feels like winning to me. He screamed again, this time a wordless roar of pure frustration and rage. I held the phone away from my ear for a second. The sound was ugly, animalistic. It was the sound of his plan failing, of his arrogance crashing down around him. It was the sound of a man who thought he was invincible, discovering he wasn't. I'll fight you, he yelled, his voice cracking. You'll never see a penny of that money. That's for the courts to decide now, I said, my voice still calm, almost detached. Unlike you, I'm letting the law handle it. And right now, the law says that money isn't yours or Sarah's to spend. It's frozen, safe, waiting. I didn't wait for his response. I hung up the phone. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. The silence in the hotel room felt different. It wasn't empty or despairing. It was quiet, charged with a fragile peace. I had faced the storm, found my footing, and pushed back. I hadn't just dodged the bullet. I had picked it up and pointed it right back. The aftermath wasn't easy. The legal battle that followed the freeze was draining, emotionally and financially, though Sarah worked wonders. But having the money frozen was the ultimate leverage. It forced him to the table. It proved my case, that he had attempted to steal marital assets. The freeze wasn't just a legal maneuver, it was a psychological one. It stripped him of his power, of his perceived victory. The mistress, realizing the money was inaccessible and now tied up in a messy legal fight, reportedly distanced herself quickly. His grand plan had backfired spectacularly, leaving him exposed and facing the consequences not just from me, but from the legal system he thought he'd circumvented. Eventually, there was a settlement. It wasn't perfect. Nothing after this level of betrayal ever could be. The marriage was irrevocably broken. The trust was annihilated. But the money, the crucial $25 million, was largely recovered and divided equitably, as it should have been in the first place. It wasn't a joyful inheritance. It was tainted money, a constant reminder of the cost of his lies. But it was mine. It was my security, my future reclaimed. Walking away from the marriage, from the house, was painful. It felt like burying a life. But I wasn't walking away empty-handed or broken. I was walking away with my head held high, with my financial independence intact, and with a profound understanding of my own strength. He thought he could take everything from me, leave me with nothing. He didn't realize that the most valuable thing I possessed wasn't in that bank account. It was inside me, the ability to fight, to persevere, to stand up for myself when everything seemed lost. The house feels different now, the one I bought for myself. It's smaller, quieter, but it's mine. Every corner of it is built on truth, not lies. The garden here is new, just starting to bloom. Tending to it, I think about how even in the harshest winters, life finds a way to return. The betrayal left a scar, a deep, jagged one. Trust is a fragile thing, easily shattered, almost impossible to fully repair. I learned that some people, even those closest to you, are capable of unimaginable cruelty for their own gain. But I also learned that I am capable of resilience I never knew I possessed. I faced down a man who tried to ruin me and walked away whole. Not unscathed, but whole. And that, in its own quiet way, feels like winning. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.